My father mocked me in front of everyone until his Navy SEAL protege whispered, "Black Widow, hi, my beautiful family. I speak to you today with a heart full of love, but also with truth. Our channel is built on your strength, your love, and your support. Every story I write is written with tears, with passion, and with prayer for each one of you. But my family, I see the channel going down because many forget to like, many forget to comment. It hurts me because it feels like my hard work is left unseen. That I ask you today, not just as a creator, but as your brother who truly loves you. Please, whenever you watch, give your love back. A simple like, a simple comment keeps this family alive, keeps our light shining, and gives me the power to bring you more and more beautiful stories. May God bless every woman in this family with honor, with dignity, and with unshakable strength. May every man be blessed with wisdom and respect. May our children rise higher than mountains. And may every home be filled with endless love and peace. Amen. If your heart is true, write present. If your love is real, write in the comment where you're watching from. The night started like every other dinner with my dad, loud, uncomfortable, and destined to end with me as the punchline. He had that way of filling a room, not with warmth, but with authority. People leaned in when he spoke, laughed when he joked, even if the joke was me, especially if the joke was me. That night, though, he turned it into a performance that we were at the table with one of his prized proteges, a former Navy SEAL named Cole. The guy looked like he'd been carved from stone, broad shoulders, that no-nonsense stare, the kind of man my father wished he'd raised. And me? I was the contrast, the comparison, the disappointment sitting across the table, quietly pushing peas around my plate. Dad poured himself another drink and smirked. "This one here," he said, jerking a thumb toward me, "wouldn't last a day in boot camp. Spends more time with books than with a barbell. If a stiff wind came through, it'd knock him clean over." The table erupted. My father's laugh thundered the loudest, of course. He clapped Cole on the shoulder, waiting for his golden boy to join in. I could feel the heat in my face, the familiar mix of humiliation and anger simmering just beneath my skin. I'd lived with this my whole life, mocked at birthdays, belittled at barbecues, embarrassed in front of dates. This was nothing new, but Cole didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. Instead, he leaned forward, eyes narrowing on me like he was seeing something the others couldn't. The laughter around us faded into a dull hum as his voice cut through the noise. "Black Widow." 2 words. Quiet, deliberate. But the effect? Instant. The room stilled. My fork slipped against the plate, the scrape sharp in the silence. Dad blinked, confused, and for the first time that night, maybe the first time ever, the spotlight shifted. Because here's the thing. My father had spent years painting me as weak, useless, the butt of every joke. But in that single moment, a decorated Navy SEAL recognized me not as a failure, but as someone else entirely. Someone he clearly knew. Someone dangerous enough to earn a name like that. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The weight in Cole's tone carried more power than any comeback I could have delivered. My father's smirk faltered, just slightly, but enough for me to notice. And sitting there, in that tense silence, I realized this wasn't just another round of petty mockery. No, this was the moment everything began to shift. My father thought he knew who I was, thought he could break me down with laughter and cheap shots. But he had no idea what he was actually dealing with. This wasn't just family drama. This was identity buried deep, secrets he never saw coming, and a reckoning that would leave him questioning everything he thought he knew. And hey, If you love stories where justice isn't just served, it's chilled and plated with silver, please hit subscribe. These scripts take hours to write, edit, and, trust me, emotionally recover from secondhand rage. Your support means the world. Growing up, my dad never let me forget one thing. I wasn't the son he wanted. He came from the Navy, rigid, disciplined, built on the idea that toughness wasn't optional. It was survival. He carried that into our house like a second skin. The problem? I wasn't built like him. I wasn't the kid doing push-ups before school or sneaking weights into the garage. I was the one with a book tucked under my arm, a notebook filled with scribbles, and a head full of questions he never thought were worth asking. And in his eyes, that made me weak that he didn't just think it, he performed it. Every family gathering turned into a roast at my expense. Birthdays, holidays, even the time I brought home my first A-plus science project. Don't let him fool you, he said, ruffling my hair so hard it nearly knocked my glasses off. The kid couldn't tell his left foot from his right in a pair of boots. The adults laughed, the kids followed. I smiled because what else could I do? But inside, each laugh landed like a punch. School wasn't much of a refuge either. My dad had a way of making sure my teachers, and even my coaches, knew I was as soft. I remember one soccer game. I played my heart out, finally got a chance to score, and missed. Just missed. After the game, instead of encouragement, Dad clapped me on the back and said loud enough for the team to hear, "That's my boy. Can't hit the goal, but I bet he can recite a poem about it." The laughter stung worse than the loss. That it wasn't that I didn't try to meet his expectations. I did. I joined ROTC in high school because I thought maybe, just maybe, if I showed him I could handle his world, he'd stop looking at me like a failed draft pick. But even there, my body didn't match my will. Push-ups burned me out. Long runs left me heaving. And I could feel his eyes from the bleachers when we did drills. Arms crossed, jaw tight. Like every stumble confirmed what he already believed. And then came the nickname, Noodle Arms. He dropped it once at a cookout, holding up my arm next to my cousin's like a bad comparison chart. Everyone laughed. And that was it. It stuck. Through high school, through college visits, through every family dinner where he needed an easy laugh. The cruelest part? He always called it just joking. He'd say, "Lighten up, kid. Don't be so sensitive." As if my dignity was the punchline I should have willingly sacrificed. Here's the truth, though. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was erasure. Every time he mocked me, he chipped away at the parts of me that were real, my curiosity, my writing, my ability to see things differently. He didn't just dismiss those things. He branded them useless. And when your own father calls your strengths weaknesses, you start to wonder if maybe he's right. I grew quieter, smaller. I slipped into the background at gatherings, learned to time my smiles, to keep my head down when the spotlight turned my way. On the outside, I looked like I could take a joke. On the inside, I was storing every word, every smirk, every laugh that wasn't mine. Looking back, I can see it clearly now. My dad wasn't trying to raise me. He was trying to mold me into his reflection. And when I didn't fit, he turned me into entertainment. The irony? While he was busy mocking me for what I wasn't, I was slowly becoming something he couldn't even imagine. My skills weren't loud. They weren't the kind you showed off at a barbecue. They were quiet, precise, patient. The kind of strengths that didn't make sense to a man who thought a clenched fist was the only tool in the box. But at the time, I didn't see it as strength. I just saw myself as less. That's what years of ridicule will do. They convince you that you're the background character in your own life, that your role is to stand there and take it while the world laughs along. And the worst part? I almost believed him. So when that dinner with his Navy SEAL protege rolled around, the one where my father pulled out his greatest hits, mocking me in front of the man he admired most. I thought it was just another night in a long string of humiliations. Another night where I'd sit there, red-faced, waiting for the laughter to die down. But I was wrong, because that was the night everything shifted. Have you ever had a parent or relative who thought embarrassing you was just a joke? Drop your experience if you know the feeling. The night my father invited Cole over, I knew I was in for it. Cole wasn't just some old Navy buddy. He was my father's pride project, the kid he'd trained, mentored, and sent off into the world to become everything I wasn't. A Navy SEAL. The kind of man whose presence filled a room before he even spoke. You know the type: broad shoulders, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, calm in a way that screamed danger. He moved like he was always calculating, always ready. And me? I was the contrast. Thin, quiet, not the kind of son you bragged about to your war buddies. Definitely not the kind of son you paraded in front of a man like Cole. Dinner started polite enough. Mom brought out roast chicken and mashed potatoes. The kind of meal she always made when Dad wanted to show off our home life. Dad opened with his usual stories: boot camp, deployments, the time he saved the platoon with quick thinking and a broken radio. Cole listened, respectful but not overeager, the way trained soldiers do. Then Dad shifted gears. His eyes landed on me, and I knew what was coming. This one here, he said, pointing his fork in my direction, wouldn't survive 5 minutes in the field. Kid thinks pull-ups are torture. Probably the only person who can get winded turning pages. Laughter. Sharp. Cruel. He loved an audience. And with Cole sitting there, he went for the jugular. Can you imagine, Cole? Me raising this noodle-armed poet while you were out jumping out of planes? Sometimes I wonder if he's even mine. The words landed heavy. I stared at my plate, pushing food around like maybe I could sink into it. Mom shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't say a word. She rarely did. Cole, though, he didn't laugh. His fork froze halfway to his mouth, eyes narrowing as he studied me. Not in the way my father always did, judging, dismissing, but in a way that felt searching. You don't say much, do you? He asked finally, his voice low. I glanced up, caught in his stare, and shrugged. Not much worth saying. That's when it happened. Cole leaned in, elbows on the table, eyes locked on me with a sharpness that made the air shift. Black Widow? 2 words. Quiet. Careful. But the weight behind them pulled the laughter right out of the room. Dad's smirk faltered. What did you just say? Cole didn't answer him. He didn't even look at him. His attention stayed on me, studying every twitch, every breath, like he was confirming something. My chest tightened. My fork scraped against porcelain, too loud in the silence. I think you've got the wrong guy, I muttered, but Cole didn't buy it. His lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw ticking. No, I don't think I do. Dad tried to laugh it off. Black Widow? What the hell are you talking about? The only thing he's deadly with is a library card. But no one laughed this time. Cole leaned back, eyes still on me, and finally said, You know, when you're in my world, certain names, they travel. Stories too. Some of them sound like myths until you see the eyes that match the legend. He tilted his head slightly. I never thought I'd be sitting at a dinner table with one. The silence was suffocating. Mom froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. Dad stared at me like I'd just sprouted horns. And me? I kept my face calm, but inside my pulse hammered so hard I thought it might break through my skin. Here's what I'll admit now. Looking back, there was a part of me that enjoyed it. For the first time in my life, my father didn't hold the power at that table. For once, the humiliation wasn't mine. The balance had shifted, and it scared him. I could see it in the twitch of his jaw, the way his fingers clenched too tightly around his glass. Of course, he tried to recover. You're out of your damn mind, Cole. He's soft. Always has been. You've been in the field too long. Maybe the sun fried your brain. But the doubt had already settled. Cole didn't push further, not then. He just watched me, the corners of his mouth tugging into something that wasn't quite a smile. Respect, maybe. Recognition that I stayed quiet. That's the thing about silence. It unnerves people more than shouting ever could. And that night, it unnerved my father. After dinner, when the plates were cleared and Mom disappeared into the kitchen, Dad tried to steer the conversation back to safe ground. War stories, old Navy jokes. But the energy had shifted, and no amount of bluster could put it back where it had been. I caught him glancing at me, suspicion in his eyes. For the first time, he was questioning if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the joke he'd always made me out to be. And honestly, that was enough for me, because I knew something he didn't. The name Cole whispered? It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some random fluke. And whether my father was ready or not, the truth about who I really was, what I'd really done, was going to break through eventually. But I didn't say that. I let him sit in his confusion, his doubt, his sudden lack of control, because sometimes the most satisfying revenge doesn't come from striking back. It comes from letting someone realize they've been underestimating you their entire life. What's the most shocking thing you've ever learned about someone you underestimated? The silence after those two words, asterisk, Black Widow, asterisk, was heavier than lead. My fork hovered in midair. My father's laughter cut off so abruptly you'd think someone had snapped a wire inside him. The Navy SEAL across from me, broad-shouldered and steady, wasn't smiling anymore. He was staring at me, like I wasn't just the weak son my father paraded as a joke, but something else, something dangerous. Now, here's the part my father never bothered to learn. I didn't live my whole life in his shadow. While he barked orders and broke me down at home, I was building something different outside those walls. Quiet skills. Nights studying languages while he thought I was wasting time reading novels. Weekends spent at the gym, not bulking like him, but training in things he thought were useless. Endurance, balance, precision. I had mentors too. Not the kind my father respected, but the kind who noticed things. A retired intelligence officer who taught me how to think like an analyst. A martial arts instructor who drilled into me that the deadliest weapon wasn't strength. It was patience. To my father, I was a joke. To others, I had another name. The SEAL leaned back in his chair, disbelief flickering across his face. Black Widow, he said again, softer this time. It's you. You're the one from the Athens operation. My father scoffed. Athens operation? He can barely open a wine bottle. The SEAL ignored him. His voice carried weight now. Black Widow isn't a nickname you earn by accident. It's given. In the teams, it's a warning. A warning that I saw my father's jaw tighten, a vein pulsing in his temple. He didn't like being left out of the conversation, especially when it involved me. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to let the silence do the work. Let my father stew in the fact that there were entire chapters of my life he had no clue about. But another part of me, the part he had trained through years of humiliation, wanted to drive it home. So I smiled. Not wide, just enough. Dad never cared much for details outside push-ups and sit-ups, I said. But yeah, I've done a few things. His fist hit the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. You think you can mock me by keeping secrets? He barked. I raised you. I built you. And now you're playing soldier behind my back." The seal cut in sharply. "With all due respect, sir, he's no soldier. He's something else. Black Widow means surgical precision. It means taking down entire operations without being seen. People in the field, my people, still talk about him like a ghost. You could almost see the ground shifting under my father. This was a man who defined himself by rank, by command, by control. And in one dinner, he realized his useless son had carved out a reputation he couldn't touch, couldn't control, and, worst of all, couldn't take credit for it. He glared at me across the table, eyes burning with anger and something else. Fear. "When were you planning on telling me?" he demanded. I tilted my head. "Tell you? After every joke? Every time you paraded me around like I was broken? No. I learned to keep things buried. Safer that way." The seal's gaze stayed locked on me. Respect. Recognition. Almost reverence. And my father was left wrestling with a truth he could neither accept nor erase. And that was only the beginning. Imagine keeping a life-changing secret from your family. Would you ever tell them, or keep it buried? You'd think the revelation would have slowed my father down. That maybe, just maybe, he'd stop and reconsider the son he spent years tearing down. But pride is a stubborn beast. And my father, well, he'd rather choke on his own arrogance than admit he was wronged. He doubled down. The very next day, he staged another performance. A cookout this time. Neighbors, old Navy buddies, even a few of his coworkers gathered in our backyard. And right in the middle of it, he puffed his chest, clapped me on the back, and said, "Careful, folks. This one's dangerous. Seal Buddy over here thinks he's some kind of secret agent. Black Widow, they call him." Can you believe that? Laughter rippled through the crowd. It wasn't friendly laughter. It was sharp, mocking, the kind that slices deeper than words. I smiled. But inside, I felt the old ache. The ache of a son turned into a punchline. Here's the difference, though. This time, I wasn't powerless. While he tried to strip me down in front of his audience, I was already weaving threads he couldn't see. I didn't snap, didn't argue. Instead, I let him talk. Let him brag. Let him reveal just how little he understood the world outside his rigid Navy frame. Because the truth? Respect can't be demanded. It has to be earned. And my father had long since squandered his as the evening dragged on. His jabs grew louder. "What's next, huh? Gonna write us a poem, son? Maybe knit a sweater for the enemy?" Some people chuckled politely. Others looked uneasy. And then, almost too casually, the Navy SEAL Protégé spoke up. "Funny thing about Black Widow," he said, sipping his drink. "You mock it like a joke, sir, but in our circles, it's a name people respect. Fear, even. Your son earned it." The words dropped like a stone into water. The laughter stalled. Eyes flicked from my father to me, searching for truth in the silence. And for the first time, my father didn't have a comeback ready. That moment, that hesitation, was the crack in his armor. And once a crack forms, it only spreads. Over the next weeks, I let actions speak louder than rebuttals. Quiet, deliberate actions. A neighbor locked out of her house. I had her back inside in minutes with a technique I learned years ago. A kid being bullied down the street. I stepped in, calm and precise, de-escalating before fists flew. People started seeing me, not as my father's weak shadow, but as someone capable, someone different. Meanwhile, my father ranted louder. The harder he pushed the old narrative of me being useless, the more hollow it sounded. And the SEAL? He didn't stay silent. Little by little, he'd chime in. Not boastfully, just factual, measured corrections. That kind of patience doesn't come easy, he'd say when my father tried to dismiss something I'd done. Or, funny, sir, but that technique's straight out of training manuals, not something you pick up by accident. Every time he spoke, it chipped away at the pedestal my father had built for himself. And every time I stayed calm, it became clearer who really deserved the room's respect. The real downfall came one evening, during a gathering at the local Veterans Hall. My father was in rare form, trading war stories, flexing his Navy pride, mocking me in front of men who practically worshipped him. Son thinks he's smarter than the rest of us, he jeered. Got books and gadgets, but no grit. Then the SEAL leaned forward, his voice low, steady, but carrying enough weight to silence the whole table. With respect, sir, grit isn't shouting the loudest. Grit is surviving. Grit is outthinking the enemy. Your son's done things most of us couldn't. And if you can't see that, maybe it's not him who's lacking. The room froze. My father's face flushed crimson. You could see the rage in his eyes, but behind it, the fear. Fear that his throne was slipping. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need to defeat him. He was defeating himself. Every insult, every performance, every attempt to claw back control only exposed his weakness. His obsession with dominance made him look smaller, while restraint made me larger. The son he mocked had become the man people respected. And the father who demanded obedience had become the punchline of his own show. That I wish I could tell you he changed, that he swallowed his pride and apologized. But men like my father rarely do. Instead, he simmered, trying to salvage scraps of authority while the respect he once commanded bled away drop by drop. And me? I kept moving forward. Quietly. Deliberately. I didn't need to scream for recognition anymore. The shift had already happened. His downfall wasn't a single explosion. It was erosion. Slow, relentless, inevitable. Do you think respect should be earned or demanded? If Act 4 was the crack in my father's armor, then what came next was the slow collapse. Not all at once. Not dramatic. More like stone crumbling under rain, bit by bit, until the structure couldn't hold. It started close to home. My mother, who'd spent years biting her tongue, began to speak. Not loudly, not often, but enough. I caught her once after dinner, whispering to him in the kitchen. You don't have to keep mocking him, she said. People see it now. They don't laugh with you anymore. He barked back something defensive, but his voice was thinner than I'd ever heard it. Almost like he knew she was right. Then it spread to family gatherings. Cousins, aunts, uncles, they'd once chuckled at his jokes about me being soft or too bookish for his own good. But suddenly, they weren't laughing. They were watching. And worse, for him, they were asking me questions instead of him. Tell us about that trip overseas. Did you really help out with that rescue? Where'd you learn all that? Every answer I gave seemed to build a quiet respect. Not bragging, just facts, laid down like bricks. Meanwhile, my father sat there, jaw tight, realizing the spotlight he'd hogged his whole life was shifting. Community cracks followed. At the Veterans Hall, his old Navy stories started to sound. Tired, recycled. Guys who once slapped him on the back now leaned in when the SEAL spoke about me. Even at neighborhood barbecues, I noticed it. People would nod politely at his tales, then pull me aside afterward. You don't talk much, but when you do, it matters, one neighbor told me. That hit harder than any medal he ever waved around. Of course, he didn't take it well. He tried pushing harder, louder jokes, sharper insults, more desperate attempts to frame me as the weak link. But the more he performed, the clearer it became that it was a performance. At one point, during a family cookout, He cracked a joke about me, probably carrying knitting needles instead of knives. Nobody laughed, not a soul. The silence was deafening. And for the first time, he looked around and realized he was the only one still clinging to the old script. The shift wasn't just public, it was personal. My siblings, who'd grown up half believing his version of me, started to see through it. My younger brother pulled me aside one evening, his voice quiet. "Hey, I'm sorry for laughing at his jokes. I didn't know. I just shrugged. You weren't supposed to know. That's the thing about carrying secrets. You don't do it for applause. You do it because it's safer than letting the wrong people in." And yet, even with respect finally shifting my way, I never rubbed it in. I didn't need to. Humiliation had always been his weapon of choice, but it wasn't mine. My revenge wasn't loud. It was watching him realize he'd lost the audience. The seal once said to me, quietly, "You don't need to destroy him. He's already unraveling." He was right. Why then? The community no longer saw him as the strong leader. They saw a man obsessed with control, terrified of irrelevance, desperate to remind people he mattered. And they saw me, his so-called weak son, standing calm, steady, unshaken. Validation doesn't always come in fireworks. Sometimes it's just the shift in the room, the way eyes turn to you instead of the man who spent years trying to keep you small. That was enough. Should the son forgive his father, or let him sit in the consequences of his own pride? It happened late one night, after everyone else had gone home. The dishes were stacked, the laughter long gone. Only the low hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. That's when my father finally cornered me. He wasn't booming now. No grand stage, no audience to clap for him. Just a man standing in his own kitchen, face lined with more years than he cared to admit. His voice, usually sharp, commanding, was strained. "So," he said, folding his arms, "you've been keeping secrets from me." Not a question, an accusation that I didn't answer right away. I let the quiet stretch, because silence has a way of forcing people to hear themselves. His jaw twitched, waiting. "I wasn't hiding anything," I said finally. "You just never looked." That landed. His eyes flickered, something between anger and shame. For the first time, I saw it. The cracks in the man who had spent years towering over me. His pride was wounded, maybe beyond repair. And yet beneath the bluster, there was something else. Fear. Fear that the story he'd told about me, about us, was unraveling. "You made me look like a fool," he muttered, in front of my protege, in front of everyone. I almost laughed at that, not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly him. Still, I kept my voice even. "I didn't make you look like anything," I said. "You did that yourself." The silence after that was heavy. He shifted, searching for footing. Then, softer than I expected, "I just wanted you to be tough, to survive. You. You were never built for my world." And there it was, the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get. Wrapped in pride, coated in excuses, but real enough to sting that I met his eyes. "Maybe I wasn't built for your world, but I built my own. And I'm done letting you tear it down just to feel taller." He opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to beg. I'll never know, because I didn't give him the chance. Instead, I stepped past him, slow and deliberate, like walking out of a cage I'd been in too long. The door, I paused. "You don't get to define me anymore." No anger, no shouting, just truth. And the look on his face told me it hit harder than any insult he'd ever thrown my way. See, here's the thing about revenge. Sometimes people expect fireworks, screaming matches, fists slammed on tables, dramatic walkouts. But the most devastating revenge? It's refusing to play their game, that it's choosing silence over spectacle, boundaries over brawls, dignity over destruction. That night, I didn't need him to break. I just needed him to know I was done being broken for him. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to play their game. Time has a way of softening edges, but it also makes cracks impossible to ignore. Months slipped by after that night in the kitchen, and I didn't go out of my way to see my father. I didn't cut him off, either. I just stepped back. For the first time in my life, I let silence carry the weight instead of trying to prove anything. And in that silence, I found room to breathe, that I poured myself into the work I loved, the kind of work he'd always dismissed. Projects that demanded patience, precision, and focus. The same traits he once called weaknesses turned out to be the very things people respected me for. Funny how that works, right? Meanwhile, word traveled. Not because I bragged, but because results speak louder than noise. Former skeptics started reaching out, asking for advice, inviting me onto teams, valuing what I brought to the table. I remember sitting in a crowded conference room once. People twice my father's age leaning in as I explained a solution I'd built. No one cared how much I could bench press. No one laughed at my quiet tone. They just listened, and they took notes. That day, I realized something important. Respect earned by being yourself is worth 10 times more than respect begged for by pretending. I asked for my father. Well, his world shrank. The man who once thrived on being the loudest voice in the room found fewer and fewer people willing to laugh at the old jokes. His authority, built on fear and bravado, didn't hold up the way it used to. I saw it in small moments. The way his friends changed the subject when he tried to brag. The way my siblings stopped parroting his words and started questioning them. Even the way my mother, quiet for so long, looked at him with something closer to pity than admiration for a man like him. That was its own kind of punishment. He did try, once or twice, to claw back the old dynamic. A jab here, a smirk there, but the power was gone. I didn't rise to the bait. I didn't flinch, either. When you stop needing someone's approval, their cruelty loses its teeth. And here's the part one didn't expect. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no cinematic swell of victory music, no slow clap in the background. What I felt was peace, because revenge, at its core, isn't about making them hurt. It's about no longer letting them hurt you. I'd spent years letting his voice define me, echo in my head louder than my own. Now, his words were just noise in the distance, background chatter I didn't need to tune into anymore. He never apologized. Not really. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he didn't know how. But in the end, I stopped waiting for it. Strength isn't measured in how much you can take from someone else, or how loudly you can shout over them. Strength is standing quietly in your truth and realizing that people still hear you. That's what I found. Not revenge in the way he expected, but a kind of freedom he'd never understand. Strength isn't about who can shout the loudest. It's about who can stand the quietest and still be heard. And that's how it ended. No medals pinned to my chest. No thunderous applause. Just a quiet victory. The kind you only feel when you finally stop fighting to be seen and start respecting yourself. The irony? It didn't come with a screaming match or some grand showdown. It came in silence, when the man who'd spent decades mocking me had to swallow the truth. And the worst part, for him, was that it happened in front of the one person whose opinion he actually valued. The mask slipped. The room grew heavy. And for once, he had nothing left to say. I didn't need to rub it in. Didn't need a final jab or a clever line. His silence was enough. Sometimes the most brutal victories are the ones where you don't lift a finger, because dignity does the work for you. So, yeah, I walked away lighter, not triumphant, not gloating, just free. And trust me, after years of carrying someone else's judgment on my shoulders, freedom is the sweetest revenge there is. If you found this story as cathartic as I did, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe. It takes hours to bring these Reddit stories to life, and your support keeps this channel going strong. Until next time, remember, strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathes.